if the situation continues, Japan's international competitiveness will decline, and it won't be long before the whole economy collapses. 皆さんこんにちは and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. Living in Japan, it's very difficult to notice that this country is actually very cheap. And until I read this book, Cheap Japan, Price Indicates Japan's Stagnation, I didn't know about it either. I also did not know that Japan being a cheap country causes much more harm to our society than I ever imagined, and that it is a severe social problem that we all need to face in order to preserve Japan for the future. So today, I would like to first explain the meaning of Japan is cheap, as well as the reason why. Also, at the end of the video, I will explain about the horrifying problems that this situation is causing, many of which I believe you never knew existed. I hope this video will be a chance for you to look at Japan from a different point of view. By the way, this book compares Japan with many other countries to express its cheapness. So if you live in any of the countries I mentioned, it would be great if you can let me know in the comments how you feel about the claims. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. それでは本日も参りましょう。First of all, let's talk about how cheap Japan is in the first place by taking a look at how low prices and salaries are. So far, I believe many of you are not familiar with the idea that Japan is a cheap country. But once we look at some examples, your image will surely change. In order to show how cheap prices are in Japan, this book introduces 3 examples. The 100 yen shop Daiso, the sushi go-around restaurants, and Disneyland. Daiso is a Japanese company that runs the popular 100 yen shops, where most items are sold at a 1 coin price, which is about $1 US. However, what's surprising is that Daiso has stores in Korea, Taiwan, Southeast Asia, and many other countries, but it is actually known as a 100 yen shop only in Japan. It is explained in this book that in countries other than Japan, the average price of a single product is about 200 yen, which is twice the price. However, if you live in a country that Daiso doesn't exist, it's probably hard for you to imagine. So next, let's take a look at an example of a sushi restaurant. One of the most popular and cheapest conveyor belt sushi restaurants in Japan is a chain restaurant called Sushiro. Even at this Sushiro, a plate of sushi, which usually has 2 pieces, is sold for 100 yen. The author explains that Japan is one of the very few countries where you can eat 2 pieces of sushi with a single dollar. The last example might be the one that everyone will find easier to imagine. You might have never noticed before, even if you've been to Japan, but Japan's Tokyo Disneyland has the cheapest entrance fee in the whole world. As of mid-February 2021, a one-day adult ticket to Disneyland cost 8,200 yen in Tokyo, while the same ticket would cost 14,500 yen in Florida and over 10,000 yen in California, Paris, and Hong Kong. However, many Japanese people consider the 8,200 yen entrance fee to be expensive and is a rather extravagant treat. Shogo, that book of yours is just giving us examples of places in Japan that happen to be cheaper than other places, right? You can't say that Japan is all cheap just because of these 3 examples. That's right. So that's the reason why we need to take a look at another number, the cheap salary in Japan. The annual income for the first-year university graduates in Japan is unbelievably low. While the average is 5 million yen in Germany and 6 million yen in the US, in Japan, we only receive about 2.5 million yen. Well, Japan still has the lifetime employment system, right? Doesn't it just mean that it starts low and it'll grow more in the future? I wish that was true too. But let's take a look at the international comparison of real wage index trends. The real wage index is an index calculated by subtracting the effect of price changes based on the consumer price index from nominal wages, which are the actual salaries received by workers. You can understand that out of the 8 countries listed here, Japan is the only country that is decreasing. Yes, it means that for 30 years, Japan is getting cheaper and cheaper, poorer and poorer every year. In this book, the following examples are also mentioned to refer to the cheapness of Japan. 1. Japan's starting salary is less than 1/3 of Switzerland's. 2. The average income of 12 million yen in Minato Ward, Tokyo, the richest district in Japan, is considered low income in San Francisco. 3. Japan's IT professionals in their 30s earn less than half the amount in the US. Now that you've understood how cheap Japan is, let's next talk about why Japan is cheap. Out of the many factors, I've picked up the 3 that are most important. 1. Companies can't raise the price of goods. 2. Workers can't demand higher salaries. 3. Hardly no education about economics and money is done at schools. 1. Companies can't raise the price of goods. As I've explained earlier, Japan has been suffering from a prolonged deflation for more than 30 years. The book explains that this destroyed the mechanism by which companies pass on prices. Have you ever seen the TV commercial of Garigari-kun, one of Japan's longest selling ice cream? In the commercial, the president and many employees lined up in formal attire, bowing deeply and apologizing. "We have worked hard for 25 years. We are going to raise the price from 60 yen to 70 yen. This was widely reported overseas as a very Japanesey attitude for creating a video to apologize for just a 10 yen increase. But it is perhaps the best example of the stagnation of Japanese economy. In addition to this example, cheap fast food and barber stores such as 300 yen beef bowl and 1,000 yen haircut are now commonplace, which would not be viable in other countries. These are business models created by deflation, and because they cannot raise the prices, wages do not rise either, even though labor shortage continues. So, to make long story short, 1. Companies cannot make money because they cannot raise the price of their products. 2. Wages do not rise because companies cannot make money. 3. Consumption does not increase because wages do not rise. 4. Prices do not rise because consumption does not increase. This is a vicious cycle that continues, and Japanese people's willingness to buy continues to decline. 2. Workers can't demand higher salaries. But of course, Japan is not the only country that have experienced deflation before. So why is it that Japan is the only country that cannot escape the negative spiral for any length of time? One of the main reasons for this is that the workers do not demand their companies to raise their salaries. One Japanese research institute found out that about 70% of Japanese workers say they have never asked for a wage increase themselves. According to the same study, the rate in China is 6%, and in the US, France, and Denmark, the number is around 20 to 30%. Also in Japan, only 5% of those who changed jobs negotiated their salaries. And of the 5%, only 40% were actually able to increase their salary. In the other 4 countries surveyed, 70 to 80% of the respondents said that their salaries had increased when they changed their jobs. What's most surprising that about 20% of the Japanese people who changed their jobs actually were paid less than their previous jobs. Why are so many Japanese people unable to ask for a wage increase? In this book, the following 2 reasons are given. 1. Because the idea of lifetime employment is still common in Japan. Wage increases are determined almost equally for everyone, according to each company's wage system. 2. Because employment is not fluid, it is difficult to know whether one's salary is low or high compared to other companies. In other words, it is up to the companies whether or not to raise salaries, and there are still very few ways to negotiate on an individual basis. To be very honest, I would also have a very hard time asking a company for a raise myself, and I would surely be included in the 70% of people who have never asked. Demanding a pay raise is seen as an act that lacks modesty. So even if you do get a pay raise after negotiating, others may think you are an arrogant person. Let me introduce to you one more study that asked a total of more than 30,000 people in 22 countries all over the world about the things that are important to them in order to succeed in life. While in the rest of the world, tolerance against change and human network were the top factors, in Japan, luck came in second. This shows how Japanese people leave their lives to external factors for success, such as their companies. 3. Hardly no education about economics and money is done at schools. The most fatal problem underlying all the problems I've described so far is that Japanese people do not realize that there is a problem here in the first place, because of their lack of knowledge about economics and money. In Japanese schools, there are hardly any opportunities to study about these things. As a result, the following things have happened. 1. Hardly anyone has noticed that Japan is the only country which the economy has been declining for 30 years. 2. Many people think that the cheap prices is a good thing and are proud of it. 3. Many people think that it's inevitable that salaries do not rise. It's really scary to think that if I hadn't read these books myself, I wouldn't have had any chances to learn about anything either. If Japan wants to solve this problem, it will have to start from each and every citizen learning more about the economy and money. There is no future for Japan in a society like the one we have now, where a small price increase by any company is enough to trigger a huge bashing by the consumers. Listening to my stories so far, some of you may be thinking, if prices are down and salaries are down, why don't you just go along with it? I mean, it's rather lucky for me who wants to travel to Japan. However, the cheapness of Japan is not only a problem for Japanese people, but is actually an enormous problem that affects everyone who loves Japanese culture and history. Then next, let's talk about the 3 things how Japan being cheap is harmful to its society. 1. Declined well-being and living standards. 2. Acquisition of land and human resources by foreign countries. 3. Decrease in labor force from abroad. 1. Declined well-being and living standards. It's very unfortunate, but it is said that Japan has the world's lowest levels of satisfaction for all work, leisure, and salary. In other words, there is no financial wealth nor spiritual wealth in Japan. Japanese companies continue to lower prices in a desperate attempt to satisfy consumers. And consumers criticize companies for not being sincere when they raise prices even slightly. However, concrete data shows that this does not make anyone happy in the end. In my past videos, I've talked about the fact that Japan has the highest number of youth suicides in the world, the existence of many poor working conditions due to lack of salary increase, and the usage of cheap and dangerous food additives in order to lower food prices. However, all of these social problems are actually connected to the cheapness in Japan. 2. Acquisition of land and human resources by foreign countries. Japan's cheapness not only creates domestic problems, but also a strong influence from abroad. Due to Japan's extremely low cost of living and human resources, Japan's land and labor forces are now being bought one after another by foreign companies and wealthy individuals. For example, the book discusses how prices of land and goods have skyrocketed in Niseko, Hokkaido, which is a famous ski resort, due to the influx of rich individuals from overseas, making it uninhabitable for the locals. A bowl of ramen, which generally costs about 800 yen, can be sold for as much as 2,000 to 3,000 yen in Niseko. And this is a price that Japanese people cannot live with. The same phenomenon was seen in Kyoto, where I live, when the tourism industry was thriving before the COVID-19 pandemic. The prices of tourist attractions were going up and up, making it difficult for Japanese people to travel here. These areas became places that seem they are not part of Japan, even though they are within the country, and traditional lifestyles and customs became obsolete. Other examples include the fact that the town factories with traditional Japanese manufacturing techniques are being bought up by large Chinese and Taiwanese companies, and that Japanese animators, who are famous for being unbelievably cheaply paid, are increasingly being hired by Netflix and Tencent. For small and medium-sized companies that have a difficult financial situation and workers suffering from low wages, being purchased by foreign companies in this way was surely a solution. However, will Japan be able to protect its traditional culture and technology, which are its strengths, under such circumstances? Perhaps the Japanese cities, traditional cultures, animations, and games that you are interested in may all not be created by Japan in the future. However, I must make it very clear that I am not opposed to people from overseas coming to Japan. The core of this problem is that Japanese people are strangling themselves and losing more and more of their inheritors of their culture and technology. 3. Decrease in labor force from abroad. Finally, it is discussed that Japan is experiencing an overwhelming shortage of human resources. Japan is an aging society with an average age of 48.4 years old, and more than 28.7% of the population is older than 65 years old. The number of people who can work vigorously is limited to a very small percentage of the total population, and many of them are choosing to end their own lives, as I mentioned earlier. Also, excellent human resources are being bought by foreign companies and are leaving Japan one after another. If the situation continues, Japan's international competitiveness will decline, and it won't be long before the whole economy collapses. This doesn't end here. The overseas labor force, which is our only hope to overcome the situation, is leaving Japan due to the negative cheapness. I mean, after learning about Japan's cheapness, would you want to work in Japan? Many people continue to think in a prehistoric way, saying, "Don't let foreigners into Japan that easily," despite the fact that the economy is so weak. I feel really embarrassed that some Japanese can still somehow believe that Japan is a country where people from overseas want to live and work. The 3 problems that I've introduced today are just the tip of the iceberg, and unfortunately, there are many more problems that are brought up due to Japan's cheapness. Then lastly, today's conclusion. Japan is a cheap country where prices and real wages have been falling for 30 years, while the rest of the world has been growing. The three main reasons why Japan is so cheap are: 1. Companies can't raise the price of goods. 2. Workers can't demand higher salaries. 3. Hardly no education about economics and money is done at schools. The prolonged deflation has destroyed the mechanism by which companies pass on prices, and the workers don't ask for wage increases because we still carry on a lifetime employment system. What's even worse is that because Japan lacks education about economics and money, most people don't even realize that there is a problem in the first place. I introduced 3 things about how Japan being cheap is harmful to the society. 1. Declined well-being and living standards. 2. Acquisition of land and human resources by foreign countries. 3. Decrease in labor force from abroad. Concrete data shows that Japan's cheapness is not making anyone happy, and if this situation continues, the culture and traditions will be lost, and it won't be long before the economy collapses. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video helped you to discover a new side of Japan, please hit the like button to help me boost this video to more people. And my goal is to achieve 1 million subscribers by January 2023, so your help would mean a lot. And please check out our sub-channel and membership through the link inside the description box. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. どうもありがとうございました。So for those of you who have seen my other videos before, you probably noticed that, in my videos where I usually talk about social problems, at the end, I would talk about the solutions or way to solve this problem, right? But in this video, you probably noticed that I didn't talk about that. Now, it's the really difficult part. I might actually make an omake talk about this too, but in this book too, there are hardly any concrete solutions that are written in this book either. Economics are not that simple, right? Yes. So it'd be great if you can let me know what your thoughts are on how to solve this problem. I talked about, well, we should have education, or we should change our mindsets about the prices and such, but it's not a really concrete plan, right? Yes. It'd be great if you can let me know about your opinions in the comments.